Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this webinar under the Catalyzing Conversation series with Catalyst 2030, ISDM, and Ritspan. I'm Shashank Rastogi. I lead the Pay What It Takes India initiative in India. And with me, I have my panelist, Dr. Anita Lemay. She's the CEO of Umeed. Anita has been she's a medical doctor. She has been in clinical research for more than a decade, and then she joined Umeed, where her goal has been to expand Umeed's impact and to bring the cause of child development, childhood disability, and inclusion to the mainstream. What it means is that she has been transforming the organization from being one of the leading support organizations for the families and the children to also a leading advocacy and research organization in this field. We also have Sneha. Sneha is the CEO of Atma. As a lot of you may be aware of, Atma is one of the leading organization development support provider in the country. Sneha is an MBA from Indian School of Business. She comes from, again, significant experience in the private sector, in social sector consulting with Boston Consulting Group. And she has joined Atma and taking care of multiple verticals, but she's really passionate about helping organizations achieve their true potential. Finally, we have Siddharth. Siddharth heads the ASK Foundation in India. Siddharth has a very interesting mix of experience. He's one of the very few people who have this experience of being in the field, having worked on the change maker side, having been working with Magic Bus, with Project Swayam, United Way of Mumbai, and then moving towards funders and helping create a new strategy for ASK Foundation, which many of you would know is the CSR arm of the ASK Asset and Wealth Management Group. The idea of today's session is to talk about something that we all may know as very vital, which is organizational development. And at the same time, what we and a lot of people in the sector have seen is that while it is seen as a vital component to deliver impact, there is quite a lot of divergence and lack of understanding between the stakeholders on what does it really take to deliver sustainable impact through nonprofits. So what we are trying to achieve in this session is to initiate a conversation. It's an attempt to understand the challenges of different stakeholders. It's an attempt to understand the constraints in which different funders may operate. It may, and how can we as different stakeholders support each other in moving forward in this journey. So the objective of this conversation is not to put any one stakeholder in the spotlight or on the hot seat, but to have an empathetic conversation about different kind of constraints, different kind of challenges that each of us may face, and see if together we can help each other move forward. And at the end of this session, what we'll also request all of you to do is to in a way, resolve to take some action on these things. What we'll request all of you to do is to identify one of your existing funders who's not supporting organizational development for you, and to have a conversation about your organizational development needs with that funder in case you are a nonprofit. In case you are a funder, in case you are from a CSR organization, identify a non-profit partner that you support but are not supporting on organizational development. And again, engage in a learning conversation on what their needs are, what can really help them really create transformational impact. And that's the request that we will leave all of you with. And probably in a couple of months, we'll get back to you to understand a little bit more about how did these conversations go, what did happen, and that will help us at Pay What It Takes India initiative to identify the direction in which we should be taking this whole initiative forward. So with this, I'll quickly get into a conversation about what is organizational development and why is it important. A lot of us come from experience in building the organization from scratch. We may have joined organizations when they were very small. We may have experience of working in the field ourselves, delivering the services that we want to deliver to the community. But as we grow, as the organization grows, there are multiple other capabilities that are required to continue to deliver the same kind of impact, the same kind of services to the community. It becomes important to not just think about program delivery capabilities, but other capabilities in the organization as well. Rachita, if we could move to the next slide. So what we are defining organizational development, we define it as an investment. It is an investment in the organization's capabilities to continue to deliver and continue to better deliver impact and serve the communities. These are in capabilities which improve efficiency of the organization or help the organization grow better. These could be things like strategic planning. These could be leadership capability. These could be skills, soft skills for the people who work on the field or the middle management. These could be fundraising capabilities, monitoring, learning, and evaluation capabilities, technology, processes, and systems in an organization, or financial resilience. This is not an exhaustive list, but basically all of these things, when you invest money in it and when you spend money in it, they may not yield benefits immediately, but they strengthen the organization. And there is enough evidence. We have Sneha on the panel. She can talk about her experience and Atma's experience with 85 plus nonprofits that they have worked with on how investing in organization development helps. But Bridgespan's research also shows that amongst organizations who are investing consistently and strategically in the capabilities, they grow faster, twice as faster as those who are not investing in. These are the capabilities which allow nonprofits to serve more people and to serve the communities better. Rachita, to the next slide. So the benefits that we see of investments in OD are, it ensures that the organization is effectively able to scale or deepen the impact. It improves organizational efficiency and experience of key stakeholders. So the community's experience with the nonprofit will be better. Employees have a better experience, so nonprofits will have better employee satisfaction, which means less attrition, which means better program efficiency. And funders also benefit because information sharing, impact measurement, understanding what is working, what's not working. All of that becomes better if the investments are made in these kind of capabilities. This also improves the organization's resilience in the face of crisis. A lot of us in the last 2 years have gone through this. With the COVID pandemic, what we have seen is the community's needs changed. A lot of things that we were working on became lesser of a priority for the community. Basic survival became their priority. And all of us shifted our focus on those things as well. But what it meant was that a number of things that we were working towards over decades have regressed. A lot of progress that the communities have made, whether it was in poverty alleviation, whether it was in education and learning outcomes, whether it was overall health outcomes. There is enough data in India to say that we have regressed in terms of the gains that we have made. And it also impacts future readiness of organizations as it creates the capabilities and the capacity in the organization to collaborate, to innovate, to improve the programs, and hence continue to better serve the communities. Next slide. At the same time, what we have seen talking to nonprofits in the sector is that it is a big struggle to find funding for OT. We surveyed around 388 NGOs in the year 2020-2021. Only 18% of them said that they were investing sufficiently in this aspect. 88% of them said that it takes more time and resources to raise funds for organizational development. It's easier to raise money for programs. But when we talk about these core capabilities, these strengths that we need to have, it's very difficult to raise money. 81% of them said that they had missed fundraising opportunities because they did not have the bandwidth. They did not have a dedicated fundraising team. And as a result, they were missing opportunities. Similar responses were there in terms of ability to innovate and improve the programs, ability to hire the next rung of leadership, ability to provide the right kind of training and skills to the team. So it's a very dire situation that the nonprofit sector is in, despite the fact that now we have enough evidence to say that organization development can lead to better impact. Next slide, Rachita. And what we see is a divergence between how funders perceive their supporting org development and what NGOs report funders to. 70% of our NGOs surveyed said that they were supporting organization development. They were not getting support on organization development. In the next year, we also conducted a survey of funders. We had responses from around 77 funders, and we interviewed 50 other stakeholders, 50 including funders. And what we heard from 75% of them was that they do support org development needs of select NGOs. So basically, some things emerged out of this conversation. So one was there may be a difference in opinion on what constitutes organization development. The other thing that also emerged was a lot of time funders said that they support those NGOs who are prepared, who have planned, who have a clear understanding of why they want to invest in a certain capability and how will it lead to better impact. So that through line from investing in a capability to the impact that the organization needs to deliver, that needed to be communicated. And when the funders were not seeing that kind of through line, then they were not willing to invest in organization development. Rachita, to the next slide. So there are a few things that the funders can do. They can reach out to the NGO partners, talk to the peer funders and or experts to identify how can they support organization development. And it's not necessarily only through money. There are non-financial ways of supporting organization development as well. They can reflect on their own policies, their own processes. They can try and understand who are the internal stakeholders that need to be brought on board. And then there can be a refinement of policies and practices. And whatever we learn as funders, we need to share with others. We need to continue to not only share the success stories, but also failures. This is not a journey which is a straightforward journey. And I think my panelists can actually share with experience. It's a very tough thing to do. It's not a sure shot way of delivering success. Sometimes you try things and they don't work out. It's very contextual. So all of those are things that need to be learned from and share with others. As NGOs, going to the next slide, Rachita. What's also important is, as I said, one of the things that we heard in our research was nonprofits need to be prepared about organization development. They need to be ready to show how investment in organization development leads to the impact that the funders care about. It's like, as a funder, that's what I'm worried about. Most of the funders that we will be dealing with are working in partnership with nonprofits for the sake of impact. They understand that they bring in certain capabilities, nonprofits bring some other capabilities, but the common vision is towards impact. So being clear on the strategic direction, assessing the current organization development capabilities, identifying which ones do you need to prioritize, identify what kind of resources will be required, and then execute, learn, and iterate, and very importantly, evaluate and communicate with the funders that you're working. Continue to see them as a partner in this journey as well. Share what your learnings are, share what your failures are, create that environment of trust and transparency. Because without that, we don't think this tough path can be traversed at all. With that, I'll stop here and just wanted to invite our panelists. Uh, so Sneha, Siddharth, Anita, thank you for being here. And while I have talked about it from a research and like our second-hand learning perspective from what we have learned from nonprofits, from funders, and from the work that we do with either stakeholders, I think it'll be great for us to learn from each of you the kind of challenges and constraints that you have seen. So Siddharth, I would request you to first come in and maybe shed some light in terms of the kind of challenges that a CSR organization may face when it comes to supporting organization development. And these could be internal, external challenges, but please do share how it works out for a CSR organization.
Sure. Thanks, Shashank. First of all, thanks for inviting me on this panel, and good evening to everyone who is attending this session. Again, a very important topic which is ever evolving, and it has been evolving since a while. And we are now actually putting in effort to speak about the importance of OD. It's been there, but it's been there at the background. And having been on at various types of organizations in this sector, OD has been a challenge right since day one. It started with convincing people on why one needs to be investing in it while asking for funds, to actually trying to define what is OD within the organization when I have to give funds. And I won't say either of the challenges were easier than the other, but yeah, that's how it's been. And I think there is a lot of ambiguity about the concept. Last couple of years, I think there's a very focused discussion around how this concept can become much more clear, so that it doesn't become like an additional topic for that needs to be supported, but it becomes an organic part of how you are looking at a project while implementing. It's not easy, but because often the CSR Act says 5% admin, everyone thinks OD is part of admin. So if we are very fair to ourselves, 5% is not sufficient. And now the government has come up with clarifications with regards to what constitutes 5%, and that does not necessarily need to be applied to your implementation partner. So that has helped things a lot. Again, I think what we have faced towards, like, I have not had any organization come to me and specifically ask for I need XYZ funding for organizational development or capacity building for my organization or for my team specifically. So that has been one challenge, where this has not been communicated in a proper manner. However, in many of our long-term projects, especially levels of OD through capacity building of staff, or exposure visits to to increase their expertise in a certain topic, have been part of the programmatic cost, which we have been happy to support when it has been defined properly, and we have understood where is it leading to. However, supporting it is one side of the story, but when we say we are approving these costs, and often these funds are not utilized at all. So there is no clarity in terms of I want to train my staff, etc. But how should I train my staff? That the organization is not aware. So often we are telling them we have given you funds for, developing the capacity of the team, etc., but it's not being utilized. So then next year when they come back with that cost, I will have that question in my mind, ki when I approved it, it wasn't used. So do they know what they need in terms of capacity building? So these have been few of the challenges where we have faced in supporting this. But I think that is changing in the last few years. Even the way at how the corporate sector is looking at OD is evolving. There is further progress that is needed. But I think having these conversations again and again, having open conversations between everyone, because if you are looking at an implementation project as, you are not just a funder, but an equal partner, I think these conversations will happen much more organically. So yeah, that's it from my end.
So Siddharth, just also, and pardon me for saying this, but sometimes as an NGO leader, I may just see Siddharth and I may believe that Siddharth has all the powers in the world. But like, so can you also share, like, when it comes to CSR organizations, like what is a typical process, and like who all need to be convinced about the need to support these kind of things?
Sure. So within a CSR department, you of course have your CSR head, who is the first stepping stone. Then you have your CEOs, MD, etc., who need to be convinced, and finally it's the board. And all three levels need to be aligned completely, whether a certain thing needs to be supported or not, be it a type of project or a specific component of a project, like for say OD. So if all three are aligned, then decision making is much faster. But often that synergy between the three takes time.
Yeah,
it may happen, it may not happen, or it may take a while before it happens.
Yeah. And I think
there's a lot of education that needs to be done within the organization. You have to back up your, why you need to invest in something with, some case studies from the sector. It's not just NGOs that you have to give case studies. Even we have to do that. That, XYZ person has invested in a certain manner, and this is why the project is shaped out to be. So when you give examples, you showcase that you are actually not, burning a big hole in your pocket by investing in this very important component, and speaking about, if you want good quality work, you need good quality team to, work on it, and that good quality team needs a certain level of investment for that expertise to come in. So I think those are the things that goes on within a CSR department.
No, I think that's very helpful, and also it puts things in context into why that rationale for OD needs to be clear when it comes to NGOs. Anita, I wanted to shift to you, and like you have been focusing on like making, or I would say amplifying Umid's impact manifold, which means taking it towards advocacy, taking it towards more research and publications, things which a lot of funders may not see as direct impact, which also means different kind of capabilities need to be developed within the organization. And you have done it sometimes very successfully, sometimes not so successfully. So just wanted to learn from like you, what has been your experience like? How have you presented your needs to the funders? How have you convinced them? What have been the challenges and learnings from failures, if I may say that?
I want to start by saying hi to everyone as well. So I'll share our journey with some examples. Actually, I joined Umid about 7 years back, and I remember at that time one of our foreign individual high net worth donors had told our founder that he'd like to give money for 3 years for a communications person and a fundraising person at Umid. We didn't have these people at Umid at that time. And that was pivotal actually for us. We didn't know this was OD. OD, I think is a term that by itself can feel overwhelming, but it's really simple things. It's the teams and the processes and the functionalities we need to be able to sustain our impact and grow our impact, like Shashank said right at the beginning of his presentation. So that initial investment by that foreign donor today has led us to have a fundraising team, which is 5 members, and a comms team, a communications team, which is 4 members. He gave the funding only for 3 years, but thereafter the team has grown because of that initial investment. And the communications team actually now runs awareness as a program. So it's shifted from being a shared service team to a program team, basically. So that was an important starting milestone for us. The next sort of milestone I remember is when one of our Indian CSR donors, we had a conversation with them because we wanted to set up a monitoring and evaluation team. This donor had been with us for about 3 years. So this is Indian CSR this time, and we were able to have a conversation with them and say we'd really like to establish them. They were looking to invest as well. So along with programmatic funding, they gave us funding for a monitoring and evaluation person, which has now become a 2 going on 3 team. And now monitoring and evaluation is built into every program's cost. So now it's no longer like a separate OD investment, but it's been built into program cost. Fast forward to 2022, we took up 2 initiatives last year. One was reorganizing our organization itself because we wanted to establish the second level of leadership in the organization. And the other initiative that was going on was diversity, equity, inclusion. We were describing it as an internal initiative because we wanted our workforce to be more diverse and to be more equitable and inclusive within the organization. For the first one, which was restructuring the organization, we basically just built it into program cost. We didn't even go and publicize that we want to do this, give us separate money. It was just built into the fact that all our programs involve a slightly different structure now. And it's been okay. Funders needed answers. We provided them with the answers, but we didn't really go out and talk too much about it. DEI was another ball game. Like last year, we pitched this to 3 different funders, out of which one CSR gave us a little bit of money and one family philanthropy gave us a little bit of money. The remaining money for DEI, because it was really important for us, we covered through unrestricted money that we regularly raise at UMI. This year is year 2. We are in the process of pitching DEI again this year. We've pitched it to 3 different donors this year as well. We don't know what will come through or not, but we have learned on how to pitch it differently. So from pitching it as an internal initiative, we are now pitching it as when we do this internally, it will change the way we run our programs. And therefore, our programs themselves will start being accessible to more diverse populations out there and therefore become more equitable and inclusive, which speaks to the point made earlier about how can you pitch your OD needs in a way that will tell donors about how they will create more effective program impact, rather than just talk about it as an internal investment. I will say sort of our key learnings, therefore, have been plan and prioritize. Speak transparently to donors, especially with long-term donors, have ongoing conversations, understand their processes and explain your needs, have backups. So diversify, pitch to a multiple range of funders and have backup plans, and learn from failures. I think every time my pitch fails, we feel bad. Me and the fundraising team feel bad about it, but then we think about how we can do it differently next time. So I think that is really important. So my 3 cents perhaps on that, Shashank and everyone.
And any thing from the funder side, any challenges that you have seen on the funder side, which like even if they're not funding, like I don't know how to put it, like can it be an easier process for you as an NGO or a learning process for you?
I think our experience has been new funders. The first-time funders are very unlikely to straight go into funding organizational development. So it's a conversation to be had with funders who are long-term into this and who are evolved at some level. So one, the trust and credibility has been built, and then they are the kind of funders who will sort of understand this. We had an instance where a funder wanted to fund OD, but the kind of OD they wanted to fund wasn't matching with what our priorities for OD that year were. So that also happens. And then sometimes, like in hindsight, I'm thinking, oh, we could have pitched this, right? And it's too late by then because they've already told you what you pitched doesn't work. So I think the key is strategize about who you will fund to, and typically ask multiple people. And like I said, for us, our backup is unrestricted money. We do have a strategy for CSR, foundations, high net worth individuals, and retail. And so if we know this is a priority, worst case, we don't get funding from CSR or foundations, we will fund it internally. It also shows funders the next year our commitment that this is really, really important to us. Yeah.
I hear you. And I think, Mangesh, I don't know whether we can unmute you, but I think the point you're making on the chat is very important, that from the funder side, it requires longer commitment, a clarity of outcomes, and a joint ownership. I think this joint ownership point that Mangesh, you are saying is very, very important to think from a funder side. And I hear you on like having good and successful documented example of OD support. And I think Sneha, on that, I'll shift to you as well, to just like intermediaries play a very important role. There are intermediaries like us who may focus on specific things like strategy or org structure. And then there are, for lack of a better word, a sort of like long-term partner intermediaries like Atma, who sort of handhold nonprofits, early stage nonprofits, through their journey of what will they need, who can provide it better. So what are the key shifts that you have observed in the sector and with regards to funders investing in OD? And are there any trends that you would want to highlight?
Sure. Thanks, Shashank, and it was great just listening to both Siddharth and Anita, some very relevant and sort of practical experiential learnings from what you've shared. I'd like to come in on a similar lens and share what we've observed just in our experience over the last couple of years. I have been at Atma for 5 years now. As an organization, we've been around for 15 years. We've worked with close to 85 plus nonprofits intensively. And when I say that, it's a minimum of one, but typically a 3-year period with each NGO. And so what I'm sharing is a little bit in that context. What we've seen, Shashank, is that there has been a perceived shift in the sector and the ecosystem over the last, I would say, 2 to 3 years, right? We see that funders have become a lot more aware, firstly, of this topic and this need, right, that their grantees and nonprofit partners face. I would perhaps give a little bit of credit to the pandemic because what really happened in that first year was that most organizations were not actually able to execute and implement their programs. And so there was this sort of gap, right? Or the way I would like to look at it is like the space for many of them to even sit and reflect, both the nonprofit and the donor end, to say, okay, what else is going on? If you're not funding and if you're not implementing your programs, then what are you doing? What are your needs? What do you need from us? What else could you be doing, right? And these kind of questions started coming up because of that sort of constraint and challenge actually in the sector. And so to us, we saw that it was an opportunity for those who are sort of coming in with a little bit of a learning mindset to understand that, okay, there are all of these other areas in which nonprofits should be and can be investing at this point in time when they're not implementing their program, right? So it just created that space, I would say, for that to sort of emerge. We have seen shifts in the openness that donors have towards OD, but it's a slow one. So in our experience, because our work is OD, so most of the times this is what we're talking to donors about, what we're trying to create awareness around, what we're trying to understand from nonprofits are their needs. And so what we've seen is that, if perhaps earlier 1 or 2 out of 10 donors used to support these kind of costs, that number may have shifted towards 2 or 3, right? It's still not jumping, but it's shifting. And of course, I'm saying this anecdotally, but this is through our experience set, right? And we talk to a lot of donors every year just around making a case for this, explaining what value this adds to nonprofits, why it's an important area to invest in. we have also seen that it's not the same across donor categories. So as the point was being made earlier, there is a lot more openness to support OD in certain kinds of donors, right? So the ones that are generally the most reluctant are CSR donors. And I think that comes from the sort of regulations and strictures under which that funding, is sort of subjected to. We've seen a lot more openness in the case of family foundations, in the case of individuals, HNI donors, who are a lot more flexible in their why of giving and their what of giving, right? So that perhaps is something for organizations to think about as they pitch. And to the point that, like Anita was also making earlier, we've seen we would say 3 broad categories, right, of donors that tend to be very open to supporting OD investments, especially in the last few years. I think one is the long-term donor. So this is to echo what Anita was saying, but it's true. When we look at the nonprofits we work with, those that are being supported by existing donors, typically those are donors that have worked with that NGO for a minimum of 3 years, and in some cases even 6 to 8 years, right? And that sort of commitment just brings with it this understanding, empathy, trying to really listen to what the nonprofit needs, because beyond a programmatic grant, year on year, these needs start to then emerge in terms of what is holding you back, why is the impact not scaling, why are we looking at the same outcome year on year? And I think then those questions start to emerge, whereas shorter term grants don't typically enable organizations, both donors and NGOs, to reflect on such questions, right? That's one. The second kind of donors that we've seen really pick this up is, those that are very relationship oriented. So these are again the individual category, etc., where they're not giving necessarily for a number that you may put up at the end of that grant to say that I want to achieve X number of children or villages or impact, but they're really giving because they believe in your cause and they believe in you, right? So those relationship oriented donors are definitely the second category that we see being very open. And the third would really be the donors who want to try out new things. And this one is probably the hardest to identify, but we've seen that donors who say that, we want to do something different. We don't want to fund education because 60% plus of funding goes to education. We actually want to fund an area that is unfunded. We want to fund a region that is unfunded. Like this mindset is the other one, because OD is on the margins. It's not the front and center. It's not the mainstream. So that sort of a donor is much more open to understanding this need and supporting it. And last, I just want to call out is that I'm not sure if this is a category, but we've see this play out with a couple of donors actually, and nonprofits that we work with, that donors who say that we've worked with you for 6+ years, okay, but where is this going? And what have we built for you? Because if we exit, there are cases where, because the nonprofits have been so used to one donor supporting or 2 donors supporting, that they've never built capabilities to pitch more widely, diversify their donor base. And there is this dependence that almost gets created on a donor, right? And so there are those donors who come back and say that, we want a better sort of exit plan, in the sense that we don't want to leave this NGO in a bad position when we exit. We don't want to leave them in the lurch. We want them to be self-sufficient, independent, capable, even without us in the picture. And then that's also a donor that would be very interested in, sort of supporting OD, because it serves that longer term objective and sort of greater good beyond programs and on-ground impact.
Sure. Thanks, Neha. And just wanted to touch on that point that Mangesh talked about, how do we bring out these case studies? How do we bring out these success stories more? Because I think there's another conversation in the chat that the impact of OD is not direct, isn't it? It helps the organization, then the organization does something which leads to impact. So how do we, as a sector, bring out this aspect of OD does help in creating impact?
Yeah. No, great question, Shashank. And this is a question that we ask ourselves on a daily basis, because it is complex. to sort of define the impact of OD, because it doesn't come as clearly or as measurably as, say, programmatic impact, right? So you can't track it the way you can track learning outcomes growth, or the way you can track just the scale of your initiatives. It has to go deeper than that, and there are both quantitative as well as qualitative aspects to the impact of OD, right? So at Atma, the way that we've structured this, and this is a constant learning sort of space for us, right? I don't think I would say that like we've hit it on the nail and this is it. This is how the impact of OD needs to be measured. But I think what we've really done very diligently is just tried our level best to listen, to learn, to hear, and let our nonprofits actually tell us what is happening because of this, right? Because it might be, our perspective might be one, which is that we think OD should let you scale, or we think OD should allow you to do your programs better and improve your outcomes. But really, is that happening? And the answer needs to come not from, in my opinion, intermediaries or like an Atma, but it has to come from nonprofits, right? What we need to enable is the measurement of that. What we need to enable is the standardization of that. So what I'll call out in terms of some of those learnings, Shashank, is that we've typically seen 3 broad outcomes, right, that get created as a result of OD. One is that there is something to be said about scale. And though scale is a term which just lends itself to quantifiableness, we actually like to call it growth at Atma, because it is not just about your size increasing or budget increasing or team size increasing. It is actually about growth in different ways. For example, the depth of your program, right? Or the outcomes that you're achieving. That's also growth. Or the interventions you're providing to that same community. You may be working with the exactly same size of community, but if you've really been able to do more and improve their lives in better ways, that's also growth, right? Yeah. So we have that perspective to growth. That's number one. The second thing we look at is self-sufficiency. So which is to say that how capable and reliant do you feel, right? Of course, we operate in an ecosystem. Nobody has to do their work alone. But the point is that, do you feel sort of independent enough and capable enough to do the day in, day outs of what it takes to run a nonprofit? Because it's not that easy, right? So without, say, even an Atma in the picture, are you comfortable with fundraising as a role? Because there are many times, not early stage nonprofit leaders that they're very uncomfortable with it. They just find it extremely hard to do. And with all empathy towards that, it is a key part of what it takes to run a nonprofit in the country, right? So I think, are you comfortable? Are there those sort of capabilities that are getting built? Right. And I think the third sort of area that we look at to define, impact of OD is then also sustainability of the organization, right? So what do you operate? And sustainability is a heavily loaded word, but really it includes things like, what is the sustainability of your program offering? Tomorrow, say 10 years down the line, your organization doesn't exist, or your leadership changes, or there's a whole rollover. Will your work continue? Will you be able to continue to serve that need in society? How do you ensure that? So a lot of times we are working with organizations on things like second line leadership building, succession planning, helping them think about governments and partnerships as a way to scale. And all of this comes under that sort of area and bucket, right? So I would say, to just cap it here, 3 areas in which we would really look at impact.
Sure. That's very helpful, Sneha. And in the interest of time, I'll move to the next part, because I also want to open this for questions to the panelists. And I think to move forward on this, and a lot of questions, a lot of comments are on that aspect as well. Siddharth, to you, what kind of support would you seek as a funder, as a CSR funder, from NGOs, from intermediaries, which can make your path easier in terms of traversing this journey to support OD?
So one is definitely, having clarity in terms of what is the definition of OD for that particular organization. What is it going to lead to? If there is a clear picture which can be communicated, I think understanding the issue will become much easier. As I was mentioning earlier also, that it's an evolving topic. And I think at the broader level, if we have sessions which are, targeted at CEO level, board level,
Mhm.
I think that will be a very great way of making OD, less sticky discussion to have. Because once there is more clarity at the top, it becomes much simpler to, do things. And also, if we are, if the partner is there, there are new partners, there are, old partners. Old partners, of course, they understand after a point of time. And, both ways from, we understand the partner better, the partner understands us better. And then defining those needs become much more simpler. And earlier, you mentioned a point wherein, uh, OD doesn't necessarily have to be monetarily. But so, if we are able to identify those needs jointly, and maybe my organization would have expertise in a certain area that the partner needs assistance, we could try to figure out things wherein, capacity building can be done directly. Again, wherever we have expertise, if it is something very, specific, then of course trying to see if we know anyone who can. But those conversations have to happen in a very open and transparent manner, where even the partner should be convinced why he or she needs that. So if he or she is convinced, then convincing someone else is slightly easier. I will not say it's very easy. It depends on the person in front. But yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's
again, last thing is I mentioned earlier also was, if, for example, a donor has approved
Mhm.
an OD cost, ensuring that it is used towards the right kind of capacity building exercise that the organization needs, and communicating uh, to the funder that, this is what was done, this is how it has helped to a certain level, then either your problem has been addressed or maybe you need some more support. So those kind of conversations will become much more, smooth.
Yeah, I think that last point is very relevant in our experience as well. When we say OD is a very tough thing. So, for example, in one of our cases, in one of our clients, a funder that we were working with, they provided money for hiring a new person for fundraising. Now, fundraising is a skill and very difficult skill as well. So the organization hired someone, but that person was not really suitable for a fundraising role. I think the what really worked in the favor of nonprofit was two things. One was there were clear milestones that were identified for the year in terms of what will be done, how will they track progress on this grant, and the other was open communication, Siddharth, that you're talking about. That the NGO actually had that conversation that this person is good, but probably not suitable for fundraising. And we don't need a senior leader kind of person for fundraising. We actually need to junior resources to create proposals. Uh, Thankfully, because of this transparency, the relationship continued. There was another year of support which was given. This person shifted to a COO role. And it was a win-win in that sense that it worked out. But that's one of the examples. And Anita, I just wanted to come to you and just seek from the perspective of NGOs, uh, how can funders make it easier for NGOs to figure out what to pitch, how to really pitch it, and like make it easier for NGOs to raise money?
Yeah, and as I shared when I was speaking earlier, our OD journey started because of an evolved funder who pushed us and said, I'll give you money for this, set up these functions. So I think funders can play a big role in actually pushing us as NGOs to think about this in a constructive way. I think the second thing that will help is to scaffold us in explaining why this is needed, because as Siddharth pointed out, there's a CSR manager, and then there's a CSR committee, and there's a board. And the manager has to advocate for the NGO to the board and to the committee, and they have no clue what's going on, right? And so the manager is on our side, on the NGO side, and then the board and the CSR committee are also committed to the space, but they don't know ground realities. So the NGO has to partner with the CSR manager or the CSR head to give them the right pitch that they can take to their board and to the CSR committee. So it really needs to work in a partnership. And so every time funders ask us more and more questions, our immediate reaction is to pull our hair and say, why don't they get it? But then we step back and say, well, they are asking us because they want to help us. And so we do need to respond. And I think it's helping us sort of make our pitch stronger. So I really think that it's important for CSR and NGOs to think of allies and not on two opposite sides of the spectrum, enemies, the people who sort of get frustrated with each other. I think that relationship and that conversation will really be important on an ongoing basis. And if the CSR application has clear lines that can say we are willing to give so much, and so let us know what you need help with, including if there are constraints that we can only support this and we can't support that, I think that's all right too. And I'll add a fourth thing really quickly, which is, Siddharth talked about the fact that he's pushing for change in his organization as a funder. That change takes time. And so I just want to acknowledge that keep trying on your end, Siddharth and folks like you, because I think the sector does need more support from funders. And so thank you for those efforts, and I hope that they will expand the number of funders that support this.
And just to add, one request I'll have to NGOs is create opportunities for your funders to immerse in your work. Siddharth, actually, we had to shift this from 22nd to 23rd because Siddharth had to prioritize his field work over this. So thank you for prioritizing field work, first of all, Siddharth. We acknowledge that that's more important, but also creating that opportunity, not just for the CSR head, but maybe the CSR committee to come and visit, see the kind of work that you are doing. That can help change the perspective as well. A lot of time, pictures, presentations, reports will not do justice to the kind of change that nonprofits are bringing on the field. And creating these opportunities, and I understand that this takes resources, time from the nonprofit, but see this again as an investment in that relationship. And that will be one request I would make to the nonprofits, that create opportunities for more funders to immerse with your work closely. Sneha, sorry, we are short of time. So just in 1 minute, if you wanted to add something more than what has been said, and then I just wanted to open this up for Q&A.
Yeah, sure. So without repeating anything, I think to your question, Shashank, on what support is required, I think from nonprofits, and this is coming from the nonprofits we work with, what we see actually helps get OD support is one, to invest some time and effort in reflecting and identifying your own sort of gaps, needs, and challenges, because it's hard for a donor to see that. And so that responsibility does actually rest on the nonprofit, and it has to start with us, right? The second is to really improve our budgeting practices, costing practices in a way that we understand all the costs that go into the organization, not just the program costs, because those are the ones that get funded, but also the non-program costs which don't get funded, but they need to sort of emerge as a first step. The third I would say is that, like, nonprofits need to just ask their donors about this, right? Like, to have an open conversation, the way Anita was saying, because I think a lot of times nonprofits assume that this will not fly, like this donor is not going to do it. I know that nobody funds it. So I'm not even going to try. And I think we need to break that mindset for ourselves to just move out of this space that we're in, right? And the last thing I would say is to, again, from a nonprofit lens, is to learn to make a case for OD, right? It's not easy. It is a complex area. But again, initiatives like, PWIT that Britspan is sort of anchoring, they've been created for exactly this. So use the tools, the research, the references, examples, case studies that are there to make the case for it, right? And to really help you serve those needs for your organization by just knowing how to pitch that and sort of convince donors towards it. So yeah, I'll pause with that.
Thanks. And Rachita, do we have questions that we want to pose, or should I choose one? So I think some of the questions, Parul, you have talked about in terms of the human resource challenges, and also specifically when it comes to smaller organizations or organizations which are working in remote areas, are really, really like important ones. And I think we are sitting in a panel created by ISDM. So there are initiatives which are trying to focus specifically on the resource requirement, the human resource requirement, but I think it's not enough. We need maybe funders to also take cognizance of this and create special programs for this. I'm aware that Ford was looking at something where they were looking at creating fellowship at a district headquarter level, of like choosing fellow from a district and then deploying them in NGO in the same district. So a very decentralized fellowship was something that was being discussed with them, but acknowledge the challenge, don't have an answer, unfortunately. So Sneha, one of the questions is, what are some ways to approach funders from a for-profit organization? Like, so first, I'll add to it, should a for-profit organization be even reaching for philanthropic grants?
Yeah, I think that's the important question there, underlying that question. Shashank, we end up working with mostly nonprofits, right? So actually 90% plus of the organizations that Atma supports at any given point in time are NGOs. So my perspective here might be limited, but I would just say that what is open and accessible to a for-profit is their own sort of revenue stream, right? And how they sort of monetize that and create sustainability there. So perhaps ensuring that these are costs which come into your P&L. And they're not looked at separately. I think to the point that everybody is making, and I attest that this artificial divide between program, non-program, OD and program is not, it's not healthy, it's not sustainable, and it's not actually practical. That's not how we work as non-profit. So I think we've just adjusted to this, but we don't have to. We know this is not the reality of the way we operate as nonprofit. I mean, we are a nonprofit ourselves, right? So that's why I'm using that term, and it doesn't exist like that. So I would say that, like, for profits, perhaps just the awareness to say, this is my cost. This is not something extra over, something I need to justify, explain. This is what it takes for me to run my program. I think would be a great way to start.
And just to add, I've been in the startup ecosystem earlier. So there are equity investors, early stage investors, social enterprise investors, as well as grants from government programs that are available based on the kind of enterprise you're setting up. So those are the other ways in which you can probably take a look at it. So I think, Siddharth, there's this question on, while funders support organization for the OD work, and the expectation is that organization will track and show progress. But can funders take responsibility of seeing, observing the impact, sensing the needs? So can they be so closely partnering with an organization that rather than being seen as someone external who just gives money, they're actually seen as almost a strategic advisor and who can advise the NGO leader on what is needed and also see whether it's working or not?
So again, it depends on what is the capacity of the CSR team also, number one. Most cases, it will be one person, running the show. Again, it depends on what kind of conversation and relationship the organizations have with each other. So there are many organizations even within the sector who are, proactively, you know, working on capacity building. They hold workshops for all their partners, etc. And, it happens in a very phased manner. If it's a partner of that kind, which is, much more mature in this space, I think they will be able to, get into the nitty-gritties and, understand what exactly is needed, and also probably give feedback whether, the capacity building exercise that has been planned is actually going the way it is supposed to go. So again, a lot of communication between the two is going to help that. Or even if the partner says that, I need some more inputs to come in, either I have the expertise or I don't have.
Yeah.
So if I have the expertise, it becomes easier to, give whatever expertise is needed, or we see if there are other ways of leveraging expertise from other areas and see if that can be useful for the organization.
Okay. Yeah, and Anita, there's this question from Professor John Paul about, is there a role that the government can play in, and I'm okay if you say no, this is not something that you want to answer.
No, I think
I just want to, in a light-hearted manner, just remind that this session is being live streamed and recorded.
No, I think I'm safe because actually Umid doesn't end up taking funding from government willy-nilly. Sort of our work with the government has largely been in program implementation, but not so much in actually getting funded. I doubt that they will invest in something like this, and at least intuitively, it makes me feel like it will be easier to get the funding, I think, from CSR or individuals or foundations. What the government could do is make it easy, but I think that that's a larger conversation and not meant for this forum, perhaps. So I'm happy if Siddharth or Sneha want to chip in on that one.
So in terms of raising funds from government, again, that's a different ball game. But yeah, from the CSR Act point of view, it would become easier if there is, some clause or something which comes in where, it's okay to, it's written very clearly that it is okay to, invest in OD for an organization, given that they are actually the ones implementing most of the mandate under the CSR Act. So if that comes in, I think it will become easier for organizations to support it. It will still not be totally easy. It will still happen, like, there are a lot of causes which are there, which are written, but still they don't get support. So it's not going to happen overnight, but at least there is some sort of support for organizations that want to support OD, or even organizations who need support for OD, to say that, this is there in the clause, it is, it can be done, it is not admin overhead, as Karen is rightly, commenting. So, that will definitely help if that kind of clause comes in.
Yeah, I think that's a very great suggestion. And I just wanted to add, I don't think government directly will provide support for OT, but the way non-profits can look at government funding for different programs is like, how can you build capabilities related to communication targeting towards government, so that some of the work that you are doing can be integrated in government system as well. Because I think there was another comment about it, that at the end of the day, we want the community to be independent of the nonprofit, which then in a way makes nonprofit independent of, like, you don't want to continuously run the same program for the same set of people, and looking at government as a pathway to sustainable change is one way in which it can be leveraged. But again, I don't know whether there's a direct role that the government can play. And the way organizations can build capabilities are more towards looking at system change as a pathway, and then creating those capabilities. Okay. I think, yeah, so Parul has a lot of human resource related questions. So the last one is focused on foreign and international donors understand the value of organization development, but it's very difficult to find budget for OD now in foreign funding because 80% under the new FCRA law has to go for program. So how to manage like investments into these kind of things within the budgets is the question. Any suggestions, Anita, in terms of?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's also a parallel conversation about whether OD should be going under admin, and I think we are agreeing that it should not actually be going under admin. And so how I think what we need to think through is how does it get built into program cost? And because foreign funders may be more sensitive, it may be easier to talk to them. A lot of them understand the ground realities in the country and are willing to partner with us on those also, on how to pitch more effectively. So I guess that that would be my main thought when it comes to foreign funders. I do feel even the Indian funders have come a long way. Siddharth moved into the corporate sector from the social sector. I've moved into the social sector from the corporate sector. There is a reverse flow of talent happening, and each of us are able to take stories from the respective sectors into the areas we are in right now. So I want to acknowledge how far this sector has come to be having these kind of conversations and how many Indian donors are showing readiness, I think, to fund it. So there is still a long way to go, but I don't want to take that away from how far we have come. So I urge also the NGOs over here to have those conversations even with Indian funders. They may not convert immediately, but they will convert at some point in time. And so that is a collective thing that all of us have to do, to keep talking about it. Yeah, my 2 cents on that.
Thanks a lot. And Bharti, I just wanted to comment on the point that you've made that we need specialized OD funders. There was also a question earlier about concerted effort on OD. My point would be that maybe not. Maybe that's not the right approach. That's a band-aid that we are applying. It sort of cross-subsidizes some of the funders. The truth of the matter is that if a funder believes in sustainable impact, this is one of the costs that has to be incurred to deliver sustainable impact. And that's the conversation we need to have. It's a more difficult conversation to have. It takes more time. It takes more convincing, more data, more evidence, more rounds of discussion. But unless we try to move sector in a way where every funder and every non-profit understands that when we are receiving money from someone else, it's our duty to be transparent and be like very, very transparent about how the money is being utilized, what are the challenges, what hasn't worked, as well as sharing the successes. And unless every funder understands that this is an equal partnership where investment in the long run is as important as investing here and now, this problem will continue because I don't think there can be enough OD funders to take care of every non-profit's need. So that was just one point I wanted to make. I just wanted to make 2 more announcements. One is, as I said in the beginning, we would want all of you who are participating in this session to go back and have conversations with your funders, with your NGO partners. So what we would do is we would share with all of you some a sort of a Google form where what we are asking you to do is identify a funder with whom you have a relationship. Please don't identify a funder who has never funded you. as Neha talked about it, Anita talked about it, and Siddharth also talked about it. This conversation is easier with funders who have a visibility in your operation, a visibility about the good work that you do, and a relationship with you. So a funder who has a relationship with you over 3+ years, but hasn't funded OD for you. Having a conversation on organization development need of, if you are an NGO, your organization. And if you are a funder, identify an NGO partner with whom you have that kind of relationship, and just have that conversation of, like, if they had X amount of money, where could they invest in order to serve the communities better? So that is one ask that we have. The other ask that we'll have is we will share a feedback survey with all of you. If you could please fill that survey in, because that helps us understand what can be more useful. I didn't talk about Pay What It Takes India initiative, but that's a collaborative effort. So whether it's Siddharth, whether it's Anita, Sneha, they're all giving time for this sector building initiative, where the objective is to move this funder NGO relationship in the right direction. How can we make it multi-year? How can we ensure that funders are paying for all the costs that are incurred by a nonprofit? How can more funders be investing in organization development? We haven't talked about financial resilience at all, but that becomes important as well. And how can all of this lead to a more just and equitable society if we are also able to integrate a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens? So, couple of requests from all of you. Please do fill in the call to action form, and please do share your feedback on this session with us. Rachita had shared an organization development planning toolkit in the chat. If you are an education NGO, Sneha has resources. Sneha has other resources on Atma's website, which can help you in terms of thinking about organization development in your own NGO's perspective. And please do feel free to reach out to us, and whatever resources we can share, we'll be happy to share. And like once again, please do fill in the feedback form. Please do fill in the call to action form. We will continue to reach out to you for that call to action. We need more and more people to talk about these. We need more and more funders to talk about these. We need more and more nonprofits, intermediaries to talk about this. This is not something that will go away on its own. So as nonprofit leaders, as funders, you people are already used to tackling some of the toughest problems in the country. So please contribute to this one as well. With that, I wanted to thank all the panelists. Thank you, Anita. Thanks a lot for making time. Thanks, Siddharth. I know you were traveling. You made time immediately after your travel. And Snehal, as always, you've always been very helpful, very insightful. So thanks a lot for making time. And look forward to this partnership. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Shashank.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for attending.
And yeah, thanks everyone for attending. Thanks to Catalyst 2030 and ISDM for hosting this. And yeah.
Have a great evening. Bye.
Bye.